There's a running joke in defense procurement. If you want to hide $100 billion, just put it in a spreadsheet and call it sustainment. Nobody ever looks. But sometimes the money moves so fast and so violently that you can't hide it. That's what we just watched happen in late February. If you've been following the channel, you know the official company line on the B-21 Raider. For years, the Air Force stood at podiums and told everyone we were buying at least 100 of these stealth bombers. It was a nice, safe, round number. It kept the congressional budget hawks asleep. It kept the think tanks happy. It was also completely disconnected from reality. I want to talk about what happened over the last few weeks, because it effectively tore up the American playbook for the Pacific. On February 13th, the Mitchell Institute published a paper. Calling it a paper is honestly doing it a disservice. It was a fire alarm. They flatly stated the Air Force needs 200 B-21s. Not eventually, now. And before the ink was even dry on that report, we had the AFA Warfare Symposium. Boom! Northrop Grumman and the Air Force suddenly finalize a $4.5 billion deal to ramp up production capacity by 25%. They're pulling the cash out of that massive 2025 reconciliation package, the one everyone in DC calls the One Big Beautiful Bill. This isn't just normal acquisition stuff. You don't dump $4.5 billion into factory tooling overnight unless something in the threat matrix just changed drastically. They are activating the Sanctuary Protocol. China has spent 2 decades building inland fortresses, deep bunkers, mobile missile launchers hiding in mountain ranges 1,500 miles from the coast, sanctuaries, places where American F-35s can't reach and American ships can't shoot. The Pentagon just realized that if you can't crack those sanctuaries, you lose the war before it even starts. I'm James, and this is The Hidden Muster. Let's talk about why 100 bombers was never going to cut it, and how the US is quietly preparing for a production war.
Let's break down why 100 is a useless number. It comes down to a really boring but entirely critical concept: FMC, fully mission-capable rates. People look at an inventory of 100 jets and think, great, we have 100 bombers to send to the fight. No, you don't. That's not how physics or maintenance works. If you own 100 B-21s, roughly a third of them are going to be in depot maintenance or getting hardware upgrades at any given time. They are completely off the board. Then you have the jets dedicated to the training squadrons down at Ellsworth or Dyes. You can't send your schoolhouse jets to a combat zone or you stop producing new pilots. Then you have the nuclear triad constraint. A massive chunk of the B-21 fleet has to sit on alert, wired for nuclear gravity bombs, waiting for the end of the world. You cannot use those jets for conventional strikes against Chinese radar sites. So run the math. Out of 100 jets, how many are actually sitting on a ramp, conventionally armed, ready to fly a combat sortie into contested airspace? Maybe 30, 40 if you push the maintenance crews to the absolute breaking point. You cannot hold the entire landmass of China at risk with 40 airplanes. The PLA rocket force has thousands of mobile launchers. They have anti-ship ballistic missiles. They have air defense networks that are layered so deep it would make a Cold War Soviet general weep. 40 bombers is a deterrent. 200 bombers is a war-winning force. The Mitchell Institute finally said the quiet part out loud, and the Pentagon panicked.
So where does the money come from? You don't just find $100 billion in the couch cushions. This is where the One Big Beautiful Bill comes into play. The defense provisions tucked into that legislation are fascinating because they aren't about buying airframes, they're about buying time. The $4.5 billion Northrop just got handed isn't to build jets 5 through 10, it's to build the infrastructure to turn out jets 50 through 200. We're talking about digital twin architecture, tooling, supply chain locking. Look at how we built the B-2 back in the day. It was essentially a boutique, handcrafted flying wing. It was a nightmare to manufacture, which is why it cost over $2 billion a tail, and we only built 21 of them. The Air Force is desperately trying to avoid a repeat of that death spiral. By dumping money into the production line now, they are trying to force the economy of scale. If you commit to 200 airframes, your unit cost drops. Suddenly, a $750 million jet becomes a $600 million jet. It's still eye-wateringly expensive, but you know what's more expensive? A Ford-class aircraft carrier sitting in the bottom of the Philippine Sea because we couldn't take out the DF-26 missile launchers shooting at it. Let's get into the actual hardware. Why the B-21? Why not just build more drones or shoot more Tomahawks? Because Tomahawks aren't stealthy, and current drones don't have the payload or the processing power to survive deep inside China's anti-access area denial bubble. The B-21 is built around a concept called broadband stealth. If you take an F-35 and fly it against an old-school, low-frequency search radar, the big, spinning antennas that look like bed frames, the radar will probably see something. It won't have a weapons-grade track, it can't shoot a missile at the F-35, but the operator knows something is out there. A flying wing design like the B-21 doesn't have vertical stabilizers. It doesn't have the sharp angles that catch low-frequency waves. Combined with whatever next-gen radar-absorbent materials they are baking into the skin at Palmdale, the radar is essentially a hole in the sky across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. But hiding isn't enough anymore. The Chinese know we have stealth. Their 15th five-year plan is heavily focused on networking thousands of disparate sensors, civilian weather radars, optical cameras, infrared satellites into one massive AI-driven picture. They are trying to detect the wake the aircraft leaves in the atmosphere. To beat that, the B-21 has to be a hacker. It carries an electronic warfare suite that is orders of magnitude more powerful than anything we've ever put in the air. We don't have the unclassified specs, but the general consensus in the analytic community is that the B-21 can actively deceive enemy networks. It's not just jamming them, it's feeding them false telemetry. It tells the Chinese radar network that the bomber is 50 miles away from its actual location, or it mimics the signature of a commercial airliner. It is a flying server farm that drops ordnance. And it won't be flying alone. The 200-jet expansion makes a lot more sense when you factor in the Collaborative Combat Aircraft Program, the Loyal Wingmen. Picture a strike package in 2028. You have a pair of B-21s launching from Diego Garcia, or maybe a hardened strip in northern Australia. They aren't turning their radars on. They are completely passive, sucking up electronic intelligence. Flying 100 miles ahead of them are half a dozen CCA drones. The drones are the bait. They are actively emitting, scanning the ground, looking for those mobile Chinese missile launchers hiding in the mountains. The moment a Chinese air defense battery powers up to shoot down one of the drones, the B-21 maps the emission. It calculates the exact coordinates, assigns the target to a stand-in attack weapon, the SAIW, and drops it from the internal bay. The bomber never exposed itself. The sanctuary is breached. The missile battery is smoking wreckage. You cannot execute that kind of persistent, sweeping suppression campaign over a country the size of China with a handful of bombers. You need a conveyor belt of them. You need B-21s constantly rotating into the theater, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That is the sanctuary protocol. So we're ramping to 200. It sounds aggressive. It sounds like the Air Force is finally taking the Pacific threat seriously. But I'm inherently skeptical of Pentagon procurement promises. Committing to 200 jets is easy when you're just signing a piece of paper in 2026. Actually keeping the funding flowing through the 2030s across multiple presidential administrations while the Navy is screaming for more submarines and the Army is begging for modernization money, that's the real war. If Northrop Grumman hits a snag with the software architecture, or if the digital twin modeling turns out to be flawed, the price per tail is going to skyrocket. And the second the unit cost hits $1 billion, Congress will chop the order right back down to 100. We are watching a massive gamble. The Air Force is betting its entire deep strike future on the assumption that they can mass produce a 6th generation, highly classified stealth bomber like it's a Toyota Camry. If they pull it off, they essentially neutralize China's inland sanctuaries. If they fail, we are looking at a localized Pacific war where American carriers are forced to operate so far out at sea that they become strategically irrelevant. I want to hear your read on this. Are we relying too heavily on complex, ultra-expensive crewed bombers to solve the Pacific problem? Or is a massive fleet of B-21s the only language Beijing actually understands? Drop it in the comments. Let's argue about it. I'm James. This has been The Hidden Muster. Keep your head on a swivel.